APA review confirms link between playing violent video games and aggression, finds insufficient research to link violent video gameplay to criminal violence. So I am a layperson, I have no education relevant to this, but I look at the report on it and I am underwhelmed. It seems to me that, yeah, they found that all the research shows there's a link between video games and aggression, but what that means is fucking nothing in my eyes. Looking at the 31 studies that fulfilled their most stringent criteria, it seems to be things like students in a lab playing a game and then responding to a picture, or having to pronounce words, some of which are violent, some of which are non-violent. Other examples I looked at relied on self-reporting. One of the examples I looked at and read through, reminder as a layperson, so it could have made mistakes, and this was not one of the 31 they picked for fulfilling all their criteria. Judging how violent or competitive a game was, it was self-reporting. The people played it and said, how violent do I think this is? How competitive do I think this is? And that was used to say that it's not the competitiveness, it's the violent content that causes people to score more highly on the tests for aggressive cognition. A lot of it just seems extremely derpy to me. So this one I was just talking about, check this out. The study was causal effects of violent sports video games on aggression. Is it competitiveness or violent content? And underneath is just a snippet. 2 violent sports video games, MLB Slugfest Baseball and NFL Blitz Football, and 2 non-violent sports video games, MVP Baseball 2004 and Madden Football, were used. The non-violent sports games attempt to authentically depict the sport, replicating the rules and simulating regulation play. The violent sports games, however, also include unnecessary violence. For example, in MLB Slugfest, players can make a base runner punch a baseman so that the ball is dropped. In NFL Blitz, players can make excessively violent tackles that would be penalized or result in suspension in a real-life football game. I have not played MLB Slugfest, but what they're describing as unnecessary violence sounds like an additional rule, meaning it's a different game. It isn't just baseball. It's baseball with added violence, but with that violence comes different rules, it seems to say, right? And when I searched for MLB Slugfest to see what it was like, I was greeted with a team of fucking minotaurs. Besides this, there were other studies that suggested that yes, it is the competitiveness, but a huge problem that the report itself notes is what is violence? What is just aggression, but not violence? Where's the line drawn? It doesn't seem to be standardized, and the report seems to note that as something that needs to be looked at. Also, what do you call a violent game? How are you going to measure the levels? How do you separate the violence from other factors? They note that's an issue as well. Reading the report and glancing through some of the studies, again, as a layperson, it seems a bit of a clusterfuck, and it makes sense that they've advocated for more research and also for a standardization of the language being used. On its own, like I said, I look at this and it's just like, wow, it's fucking nothing. People should, if you've done violence right, afterwards, be a bit more aggressive maybe, have a bit more of an aggressive response. You've been brought into that place. If it's something that's meant to be sad and it has really evoked those feelings in you, afterwards, you should have a response that's different, shouldn't you? You should be leaning towards sadness if it's impacted you, as art should. Now, my problem lies, and I suspect your problem may well lie, with the implication for application of this information. As much as it pains me to say this, Polygon did good in pointing this out. 2 of the 7 members of the APA task force, Kenneth Dodge and Sherry Hamby, endorsed a brief submitted in favor of upholding the California law in the Brown versus EMA case. If I remember accurately, the law was that children would need parental supervision to buy certain violent video games. So we know that 2 of the people involved would support restriction on the availability of video games, to minors at least. Okay, so here's a little snippet from the APA's page about the review. No single risk factor consistently leads a person to act aggressively or violently, the report states. Rather, it is the accumulation of risk factors that tends to lead to aggressive or violent behavior. The research reviewed here demonstrates that violent video game use is one such risk factor. We know that there are numerous risk factors for aggressive behavior, Applebaum said. What researchers need to do now is conduct studies that look at the effects of video game play in people at risk for aggression or violence due to a combination of risk factors. For example, how do depression or delinquency interact with violent video game use? They really seem to want violence in video games to be seen as a major thing. In the same same way that you might approach alcohol, like I was talking about yesterday. And yet, when you read the report on the review, and when you look at some of the studies they looked at, it is the teeniest, tiniest little fucking nothing that they've measured. And from there, they're comparing it to things like delinquency and depression. What do you think their end result recommendation of action is going to be when they connect up all these life issues and say, look, video games are in there too? To me, it doesn't really matter. My position is, give people the information and let them decide. My only concern in all of this is pressure to limit people, pressure to censor. So, whatever the outcome, my argument is quite simple. You find out games lead to violence? Okay, cool, thanks for telling me. Now fuck off, I'll play them if I want. I'm an adult, and other people should play and make them if they want, without pressure or guilt trips. Limit people when they actually do something wrong. This report has shown me that no one thinks that video games can cause imminent violence. So deal with it. Be happy to share information. You're not going to get any further than that. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.